Hi, this is Chats Between Pages Conversations with a Romance author, Brittney Sahin, and I am super excited to be here with the #1 best-selling author, Claire Kingsley. So thank you so much. And I just have to start off, by the way, right away saying congratulations on Temptation Trails, #1 in the Kindle store.
I know. Thank you so much.
I mean, I kept checking. I'm like, come on. And when it hit 1, I was jumping for you. I'm like, I haven't even met you in person, but anything to celebrate, or I'm sure this isn't your first time, but every time is special, when
Yeah, it's amazing. It's my second time hitting #1, which is just bonkers. It's so crazy. And it had been a couple years actually since I had a book hit #1, and this was just so unexpected. It's a book 3. I mean, they're kind of standalones, but it's in a series. It's book 3, and it just sort of the stars aligned, and I got that lightning strike of just that combination of the right things at the right time, which was just really crazy and fantastic. I don't know. I sort of low key celebrated just a lot of excited messaging with friends and family and stuff. And then I went to my favorite coffee shop and got coffee, even though I didn't have to go anywhere that day. I made a special trip.
Because you're still crushing. You're doing amazing.
We'll see.
So it's always so cool to me to see the top 10 is dominated by women and romance, you know?
It's the best.
It's such a cool thing. And so this book genre, suspense. So do you mind talking a little bit about, actually, before you get into that, I would love to know your background. I don't know what you were doing before you became a writer. And if there's anyone new to you, I'm sure they would love if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. So I have been kind of a writer forever. Even as a kid, I was always writing stuff. And somewhere along the way, when I was early married, in my early 20s, I was like, I want to write a book. That'd be cool. And at the time, I thought I wanted to write epic fantasy because that's what I read. I read a lot of different things growing up and everything, but especially in my teens and 20s, I was all about fantasy. And so I started writing a lot and going to writers conferences and doing all the things. And then I started having babies, and then I stopped writing because it was which was fine. I mean, not for bad reasons. I just it's my creative energy was making people, and I was just kind of not, you're sleep deprived and everything. So I have 3 kids. And when my daughter, who is my youngest, I think she was about 3, I really started to feel kind of the itch to start writing again. And my husband got me, for Mother's Day that year, he got me a Chromebook, which was the best possible laptop type device we could afford. We couldn't afford anything. But he got me this really inexpensive Chromebook, and he was like, okay, let's write a book. And I don't know, maybe a year later, I actually had a book written, and it was not a romance, and I was not Claire Kingsley yet. And I ended up writing and I got into self-publishing at that point too. In 2014 was when I eventually self-published that for, a very rewritten, edited version of that first book. And it took a long time to get it to that point of publication, but I did. And I wrote and published 4 fantasy novels under a different name, and realized as I was writing these fantasy novels, I didn't actually like writing fantasy very much at all. I liked reading it, and I still do. But I didn't really, there was just so much about it that weren't my strengths, all the world building and magic systems and all that kind of stuff. And even just kind of the vibes and what those readers are looking for. It just wasn't, I could just tell, this wasn't where I was meant to be. So I kind of went through an identity crisis and didn't know what I was going to do with myself, and what would I write if I wasn't going to be a fantasy writer, because it's what I always wanted. And so I just started reading and thought, I'm just going to read everything. I'm going to read so I read mystery and a thriller and a suspense novel, and I didn't read sci-fi or anything, because I knew sort of that otherworldly stuff wasn't. And I read several current contemporary romance novels, which I hadn't read just a straight up romance novel in years. I'd read several back in the day, probably back in the 90s, but hadn't read anything new. And I was smitten. I was so in love with these books. I was so captivated, and they were so fun. And I realized that even in all the fantasy that I read and loved, it was always the love story that was my favorite part.
Yeah.
Like, even when it wasn't what the book was about, like two side characters, oh, they got married, and I'm like all excited. And that's not the point of the book at all, but that was what I loved. So so it just kind of all came together and made sense. Like, I've always loved love stories. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to write a romance novel and see what happens. And I kind of didn't tell very many people because I was super afraid it was going to suck. I was going to fail and whatever. And so I did. I wrote a romance novel, and I was like, it just totally reinvigorated my like desire to write and my creativity. And I had so much fun with it. And so I kept at it. And here we are, like 8 years later. And I'm still doing it.
How many books have you published now?
Not quite. I think this one might have been 39
Okay.
or 38, something like that.
Counting the fantasy ones or
No,
the romance only?
Just the romance, yeah. So counting the fantasy ones, it's in the 40s that I've written and published.
I think you publish around the same amount I do a year, 3 or 4. Is that what you're doing now, or?
I used to do 3 or 4, and sometimes even more than that when I was earlier on and crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm down to 2 now.
And how are you feeling about that? Like, do you like that pace?
It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's really doable for me, just with like life and busy teenagers and everything else that I have to do. So yeah, slowing down. The last few years, I've been really focused on like sustainability and how am I going to keep doing this forever? And a couple books a year is just, it's doable. There's enough deadline pressure that I work hard, but not so much that I'm like going to burn out.
Yeah. I think that's something I think about almost every day is how am I going to keep coming up with ideas, and how am I going to keep loving my job? Because I don't want to get to that place where I don't like what I do anymore.
Oh, absolutely.
So I definitely get that. I think a lot of us feel that way. I can't imagine writing more than I do now. So, but yeah, I'm starting to panic. Like, I'm in the mid-30s now for books too, and I'm like, what if I can't? The next time, what if I run out of ideas? Like, what am I gonna?
The fear
it is real. Yes. Like that first blank page of every new book is like, okay, can I do this again? Can I turn symbols into words, into sentences? And so what are you? Yeah, what are you working on now?
I am sort of in between. I just finished my next release that will come out next spring. So I'm like, I've worked also over the last few years to get a book ahead. So
that's amazing.
So good. So so like beta readers have that book, which is the next one in the same series. And just today I was working on the bonus epilogue, because there's always got to be a bonus epilogue.
Yes.
So yeah, that's where I'm at.
So that's a new series. Is it's Haven Brothers? Is that complete now? This is the final?
It'll be there'll be 6.
Ooh. I mean, I like long series. So
I mean, naturally small towns have lots of large families with multiple hot single brothers. Like, it's totally realistic.
I read Small Town. I've never been able to write it. I tried once and I had to put a serial killer in it, and then it just but I noticed your series has got mystery and suspense in it, which is my jam. I love that. So, and that was new to you, right? Like, you transitioned to
Yeah, kind of. It was kind of a slow transition. This is definitely the first where I've been fully marketing it as romantic suspense, because it's fully romantic suspense. Like, I have 2 other small town series and also the one I wrote with Lucy Score, Blue Lake Springs, that all have some mystery and suspense in them. So it wasn't totally out of the blue and like off brand, but there's just a little more of it. Like, there's a little more emphasis on it in every book. So, and part of why I did that is I was having trouble figuring out how to get excited about this series, because it's tied to my last series. It's in the same town. In the previous series, the Bailey brothers, this family, the Haven brothers, were like the rivals. There was this long-standing feud between these 2 families. And so I set it up to where, we write one family, and then the feud ends, and so they're not enemies anymore. And so we can like the Havens after that, and they don't have to be the bad guys. I mean, they weren't really bad. They were just, rivals. And so I set all that up. And then it was like, okay, I have to write the Haven brothers now. But I was kind of like, oh man, how am I going to write in the same town and like get excited about it? And I kept thinking about ideas and they kept leaning toward having bad guys. I was like, well, maybe I just need to embrace this. Like, there's been some of that. There's been, some kidnappings and some various things in other books. So it's not totally weird for my readers. And so I might as well. And I was getting kind of excited about the idea. And so I thought, I'm just going to embrace this concept of like the small town romantic suspense and run with it. So I did.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I think if we stick with like write what you want to read too, unless it's the fantasy that you don't want to read. I'm like, I can read through it. Like I used to read thrillers, but now I need the happily ever after. I just can't. Like even an action movie, I'm like, if they like, what was that Twisters movie? And did they even kiss the new one? Did you see it?
I don't know. I haven't seen it yet.
The Glenn Powell guy,
Yes, yeah.
I was like waiting. I'm like, I just want them to focus on the romance. Like, the movie's great. But I was like, give me more romance. Like, I need that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm like, so, but yeah. My books tend to be very suspense, but like, I can't imagine not having the romance and the happiness too. And I don't know, but so one of the reasons why I kind of started this podcast when I have absolutely no time and my plate is full with 14-hour days is, I was actually talking to a guy who keeps getting tagged into book talk and he was giving like advice for dating. And a lot of the things I was saying were people are saying romance is not realistic or it's setting high expectations. And so I started talking to him about this. He's actually going to join me at some point because he, from a male perspective, but like, what are your thoughts on romance and like, do you think it reflects life or like, do you know what I mean? Like,
I think it just depends. I mean, I think there's so many flavors of romance and so many different authors and they have their own styles. And so I think there's some that you could probably, like if you just picked up any romance novel at random and were like, let's see how real it is. It could be like kind of spot on or it could be like totally out to lunch, but still awesome. So I think part of it just depends on the author and their style. But I think I think people who say that romance is always unrealistic either just haven't read really good romance novels or maybe they're just like they've been through it and they are kind of jaded and like that sucks. Because I don't know, I've read lots of books that I'm like, I don't think it's unrealistic at all. I don't think it's unrealistic to expect people to like, I don't know, how do I want to say this? To have, men who are like head over heels for a woman. I don't like, that's not unrealistic. I don't know. I lived it for a long time, like my late husband we were like super in love and we, life wasn't perfect and we had challenges and stuff, but I mean, he was great. He was a great partner and he had, his own ways of being romantic and we had our own like quirks in our relationship, but there was a lot of like awesomeness and a lot of people that I'm friends with who I saw get married, 25 years ago now, because I'm old enough for that to be true. Dang it. They're awesome guys and they love their wives and, are they, there obviously there's a lot of like intimate stuff that I wouldn't be aware of, are they, whispering dirty things in her ear or are they doing this or doing that, things we love to read? I don't know, but I think it's totally possible for people to have like over the top, awesome love stories, excuse me, in their real lives. Like it totally happens. Like I've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with setting high expectations and it can go both ways too. Cause sometimes I'll be writing something and I'm like, oh, I wish my husband did this. And then I'm like, but maybe I should do some of the things the girl does.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I could could put in some of that,
I want to bring it to the table.
Yeah. I'm like, when was the last time I dressed up for him or did something? And, you know,
Fair.
but yeah, so I just think that chivalry doesn't have to be dead, and a man can, you know, to treat a woman. I think like what you were saying is a man falling head over heels. I think that's one of my favorite things about romance is the fall. Like,
yes.
you know, like that is, and I think that's why so many of our characters tend to have like tough backstories to get them, because it's like makes it even bigger of a fall, you know, for them.
Absolutely. I love that.
But I think we all want that in life. You know, we all want that feeling, whether it's from a relationship or what it is to feel that way. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't think they necessarily create like unrealistic expectations. And I think, you know, my husband does the audio proofing for me because I don't have time. And so he's learned a lot. So I think that romance books can be a valuable tool as well.
Right?
So,
Totally.
you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
most women are writing them. And so we're kind of like giving guys secret insight. And I mean, unless it's dark romance, we don't want to be kidnapped and things like that.
Right.
But like, you know.
Right. And also like the realism where you also have to acknowledge, like, as romance readers, like, we're smart. We know when it's fiction. Like, if we're reading a dark romance and it's like real sketch, it's like, it's fine. It's just a story.
The one thing in fiction, it's like, it's okay for the morally gray to do that as long as he doesn't cheat, kind of thing.
You know, he's murdering the bad guy, or maybe not the bad guys, and like, we're all like, it's fine. Just don't cheat and don't hurt the dog.
Yes, never the animals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so no, I love romance. I do.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to read. I've never actually read a romance book from a guy to see how they write a woman, because sometimes I have to ask myself, okay, would a guy say this? And then I try to like tweak my lines so it sounds more masculine, you know, not so lovey-dovey.
Absolutely. That can be a challenge too. Yeah, that's a challenge to write men well and to write men who don't sound like a woman. One of my tricks is I just go through after I've written dialogue and I take out some of the words. If I can shorten, unless I have a really talkative hero, which has happened a couple times, but if that's not their personality quirk, you know, generally speaking, obviously it's an overgeneralization, but men use fewer words than women. So
that's very true.
I tend to like shorten what they say, so they're not like, it helps a little bit. I think it helps make it a little more.
I started reading out some of the dialogue as if I'm narrating it. I'm like, oh, he would never say like no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's totally a girly like thing I just did there. So that started to help me too. But do you have a preference, male or female POV, that you like to write in?
I really like writing both. I've only one time written just one, and that's because the story sort of called for it, and that was it was early, one of my early books. But I really like writing both just because they have their different journeys and they have their different kind of quirks and voices, and I like having a balance between the two.
But if you like, when you actually get into the scene, do you feel more like in the zone if it's the woman, or do you enjoy getting like, because I kind of like writing the guy because I feel like I'm a shy introvert, and then when I'm the guy I suddenly swear and like talk the way I wouldn't normally, and just I kind of let myself outside of a box. So it's kind of my outlet sometimes.
That's cool.
What about you? Like, how do you?
I think it just depends on the book and the characters. I think there's some characters that kind of resonate more, or that I find easier to find their voice. But it's more character dependent, I think, than male or female dependent for me.
That makes sense. Yeah. So, but I don't want to keep you too long. I know this is just going to be like a quick chat, but if there's anything else you wanted to talk about or to share, do you have your book with you so everyone can with you?
I do. It's at hand.
Yes.
My maiden.
I love the covers.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited about these covers. I think they're just so like moody and.
No, it totally fits the vibe. So, and you said your next book releases in the spring?
It'll release in the spring, probably April. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're a hybrid?
I'm hybrid now. I have, this particular series, I have a print deal.
Oh,
And so
nice.
so those will be coming just to bookstores starting next year. And they'll be kind of behind me. So they'll start with book one, Obsession Falls, and that'll come to bookstores in February. And then they'll kind of
Okay.
start every few months they're releasing. And so I think by the last book, we're going to be releasing together. But yeah.
I get so excited checking out at Target now, seeing like
I
books,
know.
like, that my friend, I'm like, those are my friends.
Oh gosh, I know. I like my kids think I'm such a dork because I'll be like, "Oh, I know her. I know her."
Yeah,
My kids are
right?
like, "We
I
know,
do
Mom.
that.
Okay." Yeah,
Like,
so cool.
they know you too, though. Everyone does. And your books are gonna be everywhere. And I'm super excited to see them on the shelves. I'm super excited. And
Thank
I can't wait
you.
I haven't had a chance to read because I don't read while I'm writing.
Yeah, same.
I don't know if yeah,
Yeah,
it's, when the
yeah,
writer's so talented, you can't read a book and then you'll get into their world and out of your own.
exactly. Yeah, I read in between. Yeah.
Yep, that's what I do. But I'm just so thankful to have you here and to pop my interview cherry because I normally answer questions, not ask them.
So awesome. You did
So,
great.
and oh, thank you. And
Yeah.
I'm just grateful, and I just wish you so much more success.
Thank you.
And I hope to have you on again one day if I can keep this going. We'll see with my schedule.
Absolutely. Let me know.
So thank you.